Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GG Dispatch. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Alan.
And once again, we are here to share some of the biggest headlines in gaming news from this past week. And want to thank you again for joining us in our little corner of the internet. I appreciate those of you who have made this show part of your weekly routine, whether you're putting us on while you're driving to work or whatever it might be. Thank you for being here. Really, really appreciate you listening in. So, we just had our time change. So, Alan, I have to know, like, where do you stand on the whole like daylight savings thing? Like, do you think this like tango with time and the sun going down at like 4 p.m, is this something that you're a fan of or what?
Honestly, like, I'd be good to just like let's pick one time and stick with it the whole year instead of like bouncing back and forth. Although I think I probably prefer the schedule that we're currently on.
You like the early, you like the sun going down early?
Yeah. Because then like it was weird. Last week I'd wake up and let's say it was like 7:30 a.m. and it was still kind of dark, and that's just like a very weird feeling. And then also in the summer, like the sun's up to like 9 o'clock. It's like that's too much. I think like right now is a nice balance out of the two.
Yeah, agreed. I like this time of year. I don't mind going back and forth all that much. But I would actually prefer, like you, I would prefer if the sun went down sooner and you get that nice early morning sunrise, because then you can kind of wake up naturally with the sun and you feel more productive. Like you wake up at 6 a.m. and you're like, yeah, I'm getting up with the sun. I can go and I can get a workout in or, whatever. So, it's good. I like this time of year. So, all right. But enough about time zones and stuff. Let's talk about something that's kind of a bummer, actually, which is the Bungie layoff. So we got a little bit more information this week from Forbes, a little bit more light shown on the situation around the recent layoffs at Bungie. We talked a bit about this last week, but wanted to share a little bit more info here. So the layoffs were unrelated to the Sony acquisition. That became very clear. And also, it appears that Pete Parsons and other senior leadership did forfeit some undisclosed amount of bonuses before, or as part of this layoff package. But I have yet to see a report that details like how much that number is. And that information came out kind of after the fact, which always feels good. And the $1.2 billion in retention funds, I believe we discussed this last week as well. Bungie explained that they previously had spent that on buying out Bungie shares and other expenses, and that amount wasn't intended for use this late in the game after Sony's acquisition. And so those that kind of pointed to that bucket of funds, if you will, to have it prevent these layoffs, that's not really how it worked out in reality. There was a 45% miss on the revenues this past quarter, and this estimate was in line with previous trend line spending, is what Bungie says, but user participation and gamer participation fell off really, really hard after Lightfall, even though Lightfall was well received. And so this, again, doesn't paint the best picture for games as a service, because it's not, for a property as popular as Destiny, for it to have an expansion that was well reviewed and then still have it fall off so hard, it's kind of nerve-wracking. And ultimately there were bets made that did not pay off, but the remaining employees at Bungie are well aware that those that made the bets are still with the company. And so again, the fact that those in senior leadership we're projecting a certain amount, we're expecting a certain amount of performance, and it was just a major swing and a miss. But all of the folks who were involved in those decisions and those bets are still gainfully employed with Bungie, which doesn't feel good. So I guess, Alan, I'm curious, getting a bit more of this information over the past week, any additional thoughts or reflections on, you know, on this decision, on Bungie, on games as a service, anything else that you wanted to add here?
No, for sure, the employees got like got a raw deal. Like you said, that the people who made certain decisions, including probably choosing direction of what the game went in, are still there. There's no accountability for them. The whole angle of like, oh well, we gave up some money, we before we went on through these layoffs. Like I'm with you. I don't believe any of it until we get like an actual number for them to
Yeah,
come out and say
show me paperwork. Let me see the invoices. Like that's
exactly.
what
They
I
say
want to
we
see.
we gave up X amount. Like I know famously, Satoru Iwata of Nintendo. I don't know if it was during the GameCube era or the Wii U era, but it was a rough time for Nintendo. And he not only did he give up a bonus, he like cut his own pay. I think most executives in Nintendo did too, and so
Hmm.
they never had to lay anyone off. It's like,
Yeah,
why are you showing up to do that? It's one thing to give up a chunk of your bonus. Why don't you also give up some of your pay as well? If it was your fault, so someone they should be able to pay somehow.
yeah.
Uh, Also, I wonder, you were saying about that spending was kind of the same as what it had been before, but they're saying they fell at like 45% was the miss. So, like,
Well,
is
no,
that,
so basically they said that because some of the initial reporting, like when they announced that they had missed their quarterly target by 45%, people were like, what were they smoking? Like essentially a lot of the criticism that was being lobbied at Bungie was like, how were they so far off of the estimate? And I guess Bungie's response was actually, if you look at the trend line for the spending, the estimate wasn't that far off. But that was like initially like before Lightfall came out. Um, and so if it had kept with that sort of, the previous expansions and the spending that came after the previous expansions, then it would be a bit closer to what they had forecasted, but it just completely fell off. But again, like whoever, whatever bean counter was doing it, I mean, this was it was still well off. It fell off super
yeah,
hard.
that's what I was like. Are they like
Yeah.
Square Enixing this, where they're like, we're gonna make a million trillion sales, and this game sells like 5 million copies? Like, oh man, this totally failed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of
Uh,
like the Final Fantasy 16 treatment, you mean? Yeah.
yeah. So at the end of the day, hopefully they can kind of get back on track. As even though I'm mostly on Xbox, I still own a PS5. I still want Sony and Nintendo to do well. Um, and it's slightly concerning to see Bungie like this much on the struggle bus, especially because Sony seemed to put like $3 billion worth of faith into like them knowing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how where it goes, because I think I saw another article as well saying basically something's effective if Sony hadn't bought us out, like Bungie as a developer, as a studio, may not even exist. Like it was that bad.
Yeah, yeah, and that's interesting. I think it's interesting also. There's this sort of idea of like a revolving door when it comes to having like the collective goodwill of the gaming community. Like, like Cyberpunk, like CD Project Red, right? Like they were the gaming community's darling after Witcher 3, and they could do no wrong. And then they royally botched the Cyberpunk rollout, and earned a lot of ire from the community and kind of were pariahs for a while. And now they're earning themselves back into the good graces with the 2.0 update and Phantom Liberty and that sort of thing. And so now we're kind of like letting them back in from the cold. And now I'm wondering, not wondering, I feel like it's Bungie's turn, right? To kind of be losing some of that good faith. And I'm curious to see what their redemption arc looks like if they're able to pull one off. Um, because as it stands right now, nobody is a fan of Bungie, right? Like none of the consumers or gamers, like they're all feeling that, they are being judged for not buying enough silver or whatever. Like they didn't spend enough money on the game, and so they had to fire all these people. And of course, the employees that are left are extremely upset. The employees that were laid off are even more so. And so there's just a lot of room for Bungie to learn and grow from this. And time will tell if, you know, the gaming community is willing to forgive. You know, in like a year to 18 months from now, we'll see what that looks like. So, um, all right. Fortnite, meanwhile, talking about games as a service, Fortnite has the biggest weekend ever with an OG map re release. So, over 44.7 million players logged in on Saturday, logging 102 million hours of play, which I think roughly turns out to like, you know, 10,000 viewings of all of One Piece or something like that. I don't know. I haven't done all the math, but it's a lot of hours. Biggest day in Fortnite history. Also on Sunday, there were 6.1 million concurrent players, which was also a new record. So Fortnite is, you know, often seen as a poster child for games as a service. I know last week we were kind of talking about how Destiny is definitely up there, but Fortnite is really the property that made everybody stand up at attention and want to pursue that, you know, Sony included. Um, like what other games, like what other titles have this sort of level of engagement, and what do you think really drove this spike, this like uncharacteristic spike in playtime here, Alan?
So in terms of engagement, I don't think there is. I think Fortnite kind of stands on its own. I think we spoke about this like a couple of episodes ago about how like they kind of made what Meta has wanted in terms of sort of that metaverse, where you know again you can be Star Wars or God of War or you know one of the epic characters that they make. So it's not surprising to see them have this spike because you know nostalgia is a hell of a drug. So
Yeah.
you got a whole bunch of players that really dropped off, and all of a sudden, you know, they see the hype video, everyone's getting excited. You know, it brings everyone back in that had kind of dropped off. It was an opportunity for a lot of those players to probably see things that they had missed out on after being out probably for a couple of years, like the sprinting, the mantling, just the overall uh, movement in the game. Although I think it will be interesting to see how long this can kind of hold up for because you know I'm a big into Fortnite. Me and my friends play it often. But one of my friends, she does not like have any nostalgia for this OG map, and she's already like, well, I'm already kind of like meh on it. You know, as soon as I get what I want out of the battle pass, like I'm done. I'm not gonna like you know keep logging in like I did with the prior map.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, myself, like I do remember this map. I do have nostalgia for it. I'm having an absolute blast, and I can't wait to keep playing it. So it'll be interesting to see how long they're actually able to sustain this.
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, it's I think it's promising that being able to appeal to the nostalgia had this much of a reaction, because it's not a given. Like it's never a given that, you know, bringing back like the OG Halo map would bring everybody back to like Halo Infinite, or bringing back OG like of these other properties would necessarily translate into a whole bunch of playtime, a whole bunch of like this kind of reinvigoration of the community, even for a day or two. Um, and so I think that definitely speaks to Fortnite's broader presence within the gaming community, like as a sort of iconic property. But again, like when Fortnite is setting the standard so high, the fact that so many, you know, namely Sony, but like a lot of gaming companies and developers are looking at games as a service as the model that they want to pursue, it's like you can't all be Fortnite. It's just not possible, right? Um, and so it does make me a bit concerned for, you know, what that means for games that aren't pursuing that model. Like how many awesome games are getting kind of left at the wayside and discarded because they're not falling into this category of games as a service. There's no way to really monetize every element of it. um I'm afraid we're gonna, like, it's like a wasteland, like we don't know what we're missing um during this period when so many studios are really focusing on this. So um
Yeah, it's also crazy to see that basically Fortnite was in Destiny's position like 3 weeks ago, and all of a sudden they're like, got articles written by CNN about how they're just taking over again. So how quickly the fortunes have changed.
yeah, absolutely. Um, well, speaking of games as a service, I know we've talked about this once or twice before as well, but the Last of Us multiplayer title, Last of Us Factions director, is still working on the project. He confirmed this week Vinit Agarwal had sent out a tweet about Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and in this tweet, in the interest of preserving his peace, he confirmed that he is still working on that game, quote unquote. Um, and so there's been a lot of speculation on the fate of the game since the poor internal review from Bungie, of all companies, right? Kind of put the game on ice. And so seeing this tweet from Mr. Agarwal this week is sort of a mixed bag. Like, yes, it's good that it's still being worked on, but like, to what extent? Like, are they are they committing the resources that they need to make it successful? What's the final product actually going to end up looking like? um are I wonder if the recent drama with Bungie also is having them sort of reframe their internal testing. Like, are they going to bring in you know another company or another auditor type situation to take a look at the game and get a second opinion? um but but yeah, at least for now, Factions is not fully dead. There is some life here. Does that excite you, Alan, or no?
No, this whole thing is just super weird. That you got this one story where it's like, yeah, this thing hasn't again. They canceled it. They stopped. Bungie put the nail in the coffin, and now you see what's happening with Bungie. Like, you know, I doubt that whatever happened this week had any kind of change on it. It's like that's way too soon for someone to go like, yeah, we're still working on it. Like to have just resume at that quickly at a company as big as Sony. I doubt that. Um, but the fact that they announced factions what was it, like a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago or something like that. That we haven't heard anything. We haven't seen any gameplay. We just saw some kind of key art, and that was it. So just that much radio silence is definitely not inspiring confidence. Like all the rumors coming out about it actually being canceled and not canceled. Uh, I'm not like at all excited for it. Like it is what it is. Really, when it comes out, if it comes out, it's awesome. That'd be great. But I'm not counting on it.
Sounds good. I mean, I'm somewhat interested. I think Naughty Dog is often held up as the crown jewel of the PlayStation studios, right? Like, just the sheer volume of or rather the adoration that the studio has earned because of the Last of Us franchise, because of the TV series, etc. Um, it, they definitely are on a high perch, and so I think it makes Sony, you know, rightfully so, very nervous to have them own, like, to really own the quality of this next game that's coming out. They cannot afford to have Last of Us Factions come out and perform like Starfield did. Like, they just can't. And that's not to say, like, Starfield was a lot of fun, etc., but there, it was like mid sevens, right? Like, kind of mid sevens, low eights, and they just can't bring that sort of uh result to Naughty Dog, to this like very high performing PlayStation exclusive studio. And so we will see if Factions is able to deliver on the very, very high expectations that have been kind of hoisted on it. But in the meantime, I think Sony will not mind taking their sweet time. They would rather the game never come out than put out something that's less than a 9 out of 10. But realistically, a 10 out of 10 is what they want, right? So, um, all right. Xbox and InWorld are partnering to explore generative AI for NPCs. So this was a article that was posted to Microsoft's developer page, basically announcing a partnership and a tool that will be used to build AI narratives and dialogue at scale. And this is being positioned as a tool used to help empower game developers. So, obviously, there's a lot of conversation around AI right now, around AI in art, AI in writing, AI in, sort of in the creative space. And so, rather than just sort of jumping on the negative side of things, like I'm genuinely curious. Like, Alan, where do you see AI being a genuinely helpful tool, like in the gaming space? Like, where do you think it can help developers and not necessarily like overshadow or otherwise dampen the experience?
So I think whenever they use it sort of like as a force multiplier of how you have your sort of your team of narrative writers who craft the whole story, help develop the dialogue for the NPCs. Like if they can use AI to help them prototype stuff faster and be able to take whatever the AI spits out and like refine it and make it interesting, that I think the companies who do that are going to be the winners. But obviously, there's going to be companies on one end of the spectrum are huge. They're going to be like, well, why should we pay all these writers? Let's just fire them all. Let the AI just spit out whatever it spits out. On the other end of the spectrum, I think you'll have like indie teams of like one or two or three people who may not have writers, may not be able to afford writers, or they're not necessarily great writers themselves. Who will try to like just let the AI take the wheel on that as well.
Hmm.
And I think again, it's sort of in that middle ground of like an actual team of dedicated writers who are being assisted by the AI. Those are who are going to be really successful because when you see how AI kind of gets fed with human created data, it can kind of kick out some okay stuff, depending on whatever you prompt you put into it. But like once it runs out of human generated content and it starts like eating the stuff that it makes itself, it like kind of gets really insane, like has hallucinations and things like that, and just spitting out really weird stuff. So I think that the companies who use it poorly will end up with a lot of like really weird, janky NPC like
Yeah.
dialogue trees, and then again, the companies who do well will be sort of like a marriage between those writers and AI.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm definitely very intrigued with the idea of using AI tools to elevate, at scale, especially in like larger open world games and things like that, like what dialogue can look like. Um, because, again, like making video games is really hard, and it requires a lot of time and commitment. And so being able to take a sort of foundation, or natural, conversation tree using AI tools, I think can help to bring a bit more of that life and vibrancy to the broader world. So that the writers can focus more on that core narrative, right? Like the core companions, or the like the scope and the execution of that story, like the main story, without having to, you know get into the weeds on, how impactful a certain like NPC conversation or secondary quest line might be. So, I'm interested. I'm hopeful that there can be that kind of happy middle, right? Of integrating and utilizing these tools for the betterment and support of writers, and not in replacement of them, like, or as a substitution for them.
Yeah, I
Because
think the key part of this specific announcement is that like this is gonna be baked into Xbox software development tools, like for any dev to use. Like it'll just be way easier than trying to like have some third party thing that you have to then bring into the game. Like it'll just be there. So I think that's really gonna accelerate the use of AI in this with these use cases.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I'm really interested to see how that goes. Speaking of some great writing and great story and narrative, I have to spotlight Star Ocean, the second story R. It was released this past week to some amazing reviews. 86 overall on Metacritic with a 9.2 average user score. As a big fan of this game, as a young teen, uh, I I'm very glad to be seeing the Star Ocean love all over my Twitter/X timeline. It is honestly a very beautiful remake of this classic sort of PlayStation title, and so uh, it's just been a blast to see. And all I could think the entire time that I was playing this was, I want them to do Xenogears next. Like, I really want them to close out the story the way that it was designed to be finished, and not the way that it was rushed because they ran out of money, and remake it in this kind of HD 2D style. I think it would be amazing. And yeah, I'm just super excited for it. Have you ever played this one before, Alan?
No, I'm completely unfamiliar with Star Ocean.
Oh, okay.
Is this one? So I see that it's like the subtitle, like the second story. So is this like the sequel, or is this
Yeah,
the
so
first
there
in
are
the
actually, I think,
series?
a few titles that came before this one. Um, but the second story, there was sort of like First Departure, and then second story there, I believe it was on well, second story obviously was on the PlayStation, but uh yeah, so this is sort of takes place a bit later in the overall Star Ocean timeline. Um and it's just an amazing sort of space soap opera tale that spins out from this, sort of ensign from a galactic federation ending up on a mysterious planet, to, you know now we have to go find this like kind of cataclysm inducing meteor. And okay, there's like this ancient cabal of mages, and they like to do time travel stuff and blah blah blah. So there's just a lot going on. Really cool mechanics around the skills, around the private events with different characters within your party that impact the ending. Um, and there are also limiters that you can remove on the final boss and make the final boss like ridiculously hard. Um, so yeah, it's a blast. It's a great time. So if you can find it on your PS5, thank you very much to Square Enix for sending over a review copy. You can find my review on our website, of course. I gave the game a 9 out of 10. I think that it was amazing, and the only things that really kind of held it back were some of the musical rearrangements weren't like the best. And the block mechanic was fun but not fully baked, and there are just a couple like little nagging things, but overall the aesthetics are amazing, the music is amazing. It's a it's a fantastic remake of the best game in the franchise. You should get it.
As someone who's never played Star Ocean, like, can you just jump in here and be like, okay, or are you going to be completely lost?
Yes, you could jump in. You won't be completely lost. There are like Easter eggs, and there is a new mechanic where you can summon like heroes from the previous games as like an assist in your combat, but you can fully appreciate the story from beginning to end, without any experience with Star Ocean.
Okay, and is it available on any other platforms, or is it just PlayStation?
It's on PS5. It's on Nintendo Switch. I don't know if it's on Steam as well. So it's on the Nintendo Switch, PC, PS4, and PS5. So those are the consoles that you can find it on. And of course, I enjoyed it on my PS5, but you have other options as well.
Okay.
Um, Speaking of new releases, a highly anticipated upcoming release is the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and it is not being well received. It is being absolutely trashed. Um, so I have never been super close to the Call of Duty franchise, if I'm being honest. But it's not looking good. It sounds, a lot of the high level trends in the review seem to indicate that it was underbaked, rushed out the door, a lot of kind of repetitive. Uh, no real innovations in the gameplay, which, I mean, it's a first person shooter, so there's not like too much you can do with it. But the idea that there's not really a lot of new mechanics or anything particularly interesting happening with the narrative. And so, unfortunately for Call of Duty fans, not the best day for the COD franchise.
I do wonder how Team Xbox feels about that, seeing the like basically the crown jewel of Activision kind of get trashed the last few
Yeah,
days.
after they spent all that money on it and they put out a bad game. But of course, this game was well in development before all of that had happened. But yeah, they'll have to regain some ground. There are a number of other games that are coming out soon. Between now and next week when we'll have our next episode, including Doomsday Paradise, Dungeons 4, and you can also get Catan, the console edition on Nintendo Switch. So if you want to play Catan on your Switch, there you go. But that does it, I think, for this episode of the GD Dispatch. Alan, did you have anything else for us?
No, I think we covered it. Everything you wanted to cover.
All right. Well then. Once again, thank you again for listening to the GG Dispatch, coming and hanging out with us, getting some of the biggest headlines in gaming news from the last week. Until next time, I'm Jeremy.
I'm Alan.
And keep gaming.